Hey everyone, this is Zach from Scenic Sights and Bites. Welcome back. This is part 4 of our series of Let's Make Wine, Winemaking for Beginners. We're so glad you could join us. In this video, we are going to finish it all off. We're going to do everything from checking the clarity, bottling the wine, discuss filtering, and of course, trying to figure out what the approximate alcohol content is, discussing the different ways that this is done, and walk you through the process of the way that I did it. This video series is based on a Kenridge Classic Merlot wine kit, but it's applicable to most of the Kenridge Classics 4-week kits that are out there. In addition to these videos, I provide a little bit of extra information, some tips and tricks, but if there's something else that you'd like to know about, put it in the comments below and I'll see what I can do to answer you. Now, where we left off, we stabilized and cleared, put the glass carboy back in the primary fermenter and put the heat belt back on it to maintain a proper temperature. Now, here we're going to be transferring this out from the glass carboy into another glass carboy as part of the polishing and racking stage that we're doing here. Right now I'm going to take out the airlock and just put that aside for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and siphon that out from this carboy here into a clean carboy, and then we'll continue from there. One thing we have to check before we siphon it out is the clarity. The kits tell you, so many days to clear the wine. Well, even though they give you a guideline, if your wine isn't sitting at the right temperature in the right environment and so on, it may not clear on time. It does need a little bit of heat to do that. Now, to check the clarity, I've got a clean cup that I've also sanitized, and I've got my wine thief. So I'm going to put some wine in the glass, hold it up to a light, and what you're looking for are particles floating. Even if you plan on filtering your wine, which I don't filter the wines, but even if you plan on filtering it, the filters are only going to clog if you don't have clear wine ahead of time. So if your wine's not clear, you let it sit a little bit longer. If it's still not clearing, check your temperatures and so on and so forth, and adjust as needed. And you can see how to do that in the previous videos. And of course, while I'm doing this, I'm making sure that I do not disturb that carboy, because there is sediment at the bottom of it. And it's incredibly important that you want that sediment at the bottom to stay at the bottom. I'm holding this up to the light so I can see through it. And I should not see any floaties, any particles whatsoever in here. And it is crystal clear. Okay, so I'm going to dump that back in. Actually, I'm going to dump that into the carboy that we're siphoning into. So again, so as not to stir anything up. All right, so we've got the siphon going. It's a nice strong siphon. I've secured it to the bucket. That way this plastic piece that's in the carboy isn't shifting around a lot. If you don't secure it, it has the tendency to stir things up. So we're doing this step before bottling to try and get rid of the last little bits of sediment that are in there. That way you don't accidentally suck it up into the bottling. Some of the kits at this stage, especially the older ones, didn't have this in here. So every time you siphon, you lose a little bit more wine. But it's better to lose a little bit more wine than end up with sediment in the wine you're drinking. Okay, so the glass carboy that we siphoned the wine into, I've put it up on top of my table because we're going to do one more siphoning process in 2 days. And that is to transfer it from the carboy into our bottles. But while this is sitting, to just let it finish polishing, I'm going to fit it with the airlock. If you have a solid bung, you can use a solid bung at this point because there's going to be no more gases escaping. At this stage, we do not need to do any more temperature control, so I'm not going to put it back in the primary fermenting bucket. Okay, see you in a couple of days. All right, we are finally ready to start doing the bottling. Now, to do the bottling, of course, we once again have to make sure everything is clean, sanitized. Otherwise, if you've got dirty bottles, you can end up with particles in your wine, and you can end up causing your wine to turn if there's bacteria and stuff in there. So in the one sink, I've got my SteriClean. The other side of the sink is empty because I'm just going to stand the bottles up, rinse them all with, fill them all with water, dump them out, and then prepare them for sanitizing. And for that, I use the sanitizing tree. Now, the tree I have is actually quite large. It's got an additional section that I've taken off. So this tree here, you can stand on the floor once it's fully assembled, and you can sanitize the bottles like that and use the tree. Now, my back has been acting up, so I can't do that. So I've taken it apart. I've got a shorter section, enough to accommodate the bottles I'm washing, and I can do it all standing up at counter height. In my sink, I can fit 5 bottles at a time. So I've got the 5 bottles here. I soak them in the warm solution of the SteriClean and roll them around a little bit, because if there are air pockets inside the bottle, obviously the part that's facing up isn't going to be exposed to the solution as long. These 5 over here in this sink, I've already soaked in there. I filled them up about halfway with cold water, shook them around a little bit, dumped it out, and then I filled them up again. So I'm just trying to get rid of any residue of the SteriClean. And now I'm gonna get these 5 bottles that have already gone through those stages, and I'm gonna sanitize. In this top part is potassium metasulfide. So I push down, it shoots the water up inside the bottle, and it rains down along the outer edges. Okay, and it just flows back down through the bottom. Okay. So I give it a couple of pumps, and then simply hang it on the tree to dry. Now the tree, if the tree is dirty, you're defeating the purpose. So the tree, before I did any of this, I gave the tree a quick wash. I rinsed it off with the potassium metasulfide as well. So everything that the bottle is coming in contact now at this point is clean. Okay. Actually, I'm going to stack the bottles on the bottom rather than on the top. That way it makes it easier to stack the next layer. We do not need to rinse this off. Some sanitizing solutions you do. If I was using sodium metasulfide, I would want to rinse the bottles out after, because a tiny bit of residue can actually make your wine taste a little bit salty. I don't know about you, but I certainly don't like salty wine. The amount of residue in here is very, very small. And potassium metasulfide is also the same stuff that we've used to help preserve the wine. So it is safe for what we're using it for. Okay, now we're not only rinsing the inside of the bottles out, we're going to rinse the outside. They were soaking in that alkaline solution. So I like to give the whole outside of the bottles a good rinse. Okay, so the bottles are all washed, rinsed, and sanitized, and now they are sitting on the tree, and that's where we're going to let them drip dry until we are ready to put the wine in them. Here's a quick question for you. These bottles are green. I'm making a Merlot wine and I'm using green bottles. The other type of bottles that I have are clear. So which bottles do you use? Well, for darker wines, such as red wines and whatnot, you use a green bottle. That helps to preserve the color and protect it from the light. I'm sure there's other reasons as well. For the lighter wines, say a Chardonnay or even a blush that's got a little bit of color in it, I use the clear bottles. So there's a small amount of color in a blush. You want to be able to see that. It helps you also to identify what it is you're going to be drinking. So clear bottles for clear wines or light colored wines, dark green bottles for dark wines, dark reds and whatnot. Okay, so here we are. The wine is ready to go. I have the solid end of the siphon in the glass carboy and I've taped it so that it's not going to move around on me. I've taken 28 corks and I've sanitized them as well. And how did I do that? Well, I put them in the sanitizing solution, soaked them for 2 minutes, and then put them in the bowl, which I have also sanitized. So now here's my setup. I've got the glass carboy up higher. Down lower, you can use a small table, you can even use the floor. I've got the primary fermenter I'm using basically is a small table. And we have to be lower than the glass carboy in order to siphon properly. So I've got myself set up there. I will fill the wine bottles up until it's just going up into the neck, and then I will put them all aside in the box for now. And once I've got all the bottles filled, I'll move them up to a smaller table here where I'm going to cork them. So I'm going to get the siphon going. I'm going to get a nice strong flow. You can see I've got a lock. That's just a real simple valve. Press it in, it stops the flow. Release it, it starts the flow. Okay. I've got that set to just above the height of a bottle. I want this hose to go into the bottom of the bottle. You don't want the wine splashing around because that's just another opportunity for it to introduce air into the wine. Okay. So I'm going to start the siphon. You want to get the tube good and full of the liquid before you drop it down below the height. Otherwise, if you only have a small amount in there, the siphon's either going to be weak or it's just going to stall out. So keeping the hose fairly high, just make sure your mouth is clean. I brushed my teeth before I did this, rinsed out with Listerine, then drank some water. So you make sure your mouth is nice and clean. Then you get the hose good and full, and then you lower it down into the wine bottle. And if you have a good strong flow, you'll be able to do all the bottles with the one start. So now we've got a good flow going on, and it's filling the bottles really quick. So what I'm doing is I've got the tube in. I can raise the tube up as we're going, just so I'm not taking up too much space. And then when the wine hits the bottom of the neck, I lock it, and then I'll just kind of top it up a little bit. I just don't want it to overflow. We don't want the cork hitting the wine. So let's see if we can see that. That one's probably a tad bit fuller than I'd like. It's right up there. I usually aim for about here. So I'm actually just going to pour a tiny bit out. There we go. My assistant is helping me out here. When I unlock it, I've got the next one going. That's a 27 and yeah, just shy of a half.
Yeah.
Plus whatever I've got in my glass from overfilled bottles that I poured out that I'll be partaking in. And then the last little bit that is in the glass carboy, there's really not much in there. That's waste. Okay, so now we're going to go and cork. This is a two-handed, very pain in the butt corking machine. You can get nice big floor stand models that have a big lever and lots of mechanical advantage, and they work real easy. This one requires a little bit more oomph, but it does work. And a little bit more manpower, yeah. To cork 27 or 28 bottles using this thing, it's just really not a big deal. So I'll show you how it works, okay? We take the corker. We take a sanitized cork. There is a front and a back. So on the front,
put the cork.
Drop it in. Okay. These grab around the neck. So you set this on top of the bottle, clamp it down. That metal bar is resting on top of the cork, and that's what's going to push it in. So you don't want to go too slow. You want to be at a good consistent speed so you can get a good consistent depth of the cork. This is an adjustment screw, so if the cork is sticking out too far or in too far, you can adjust it up here. But you want to set it and forget it, right? They should all be the same. If you use the same pressure on all of them, they'll all come out nice. So just a good push, just like that. Lift it up.
And there's the cork.
There it is, just like that, okay? So how is this thing working? Well, this part in here is tapered. So it's wider at the top. That allows me to fit the cork in, but it's narrower at the bottom. You can see actually the bottom is quite a bit smaller than the whole of the bottle. So we are forcing it through that narrow piece, which allows it to go into the bottle of wine. And then of course it springs back. We're going to leave the wine upright for the next 3, 4, 5 days to let the cork fully expand properly before you tip it on the side. So now you've just made some great tasting wine. Do you want to know what the alcohol content is? Does it really matter as long as you enjoy it? Well, to some people it does, and that's where these numbers that we've been recording since the very beginning come in. You use the chart with your hydrometer to do the calculations, as shown here on the screen. You take your starting specific gravity, your finishing specific gravity, adjust these numbers for temperature, and then simply subtract one from the other. If there's a double negative, which there should be, in the case of wine, you're actually adding the two minuses equal a plus. And in this case here, we end up with approximately 13.75% alcohol. I say approximately because there are other ways to calculate, and depending on which method you use, the numbers will vary. So on behalf of Kelly, myself, Zach, we'd like to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. There's a red button on the right-hand side of your screen. We are going to, what are we going to be producing next? Well, let's see, we did a whole series on Cancun, so if you haven't seen that, check that out. We're going to be doing lots of restaurant reviews. We're going to be making some good food. We invite you to follow along and watch our channel. Thanks for watching.